Alright, well, it looks like it doesn't want me to share my screen. There we go. I mean, it lets me, but it seems to like cut my signal in half. Alright, share a file rather. See how that works. Jesus, there we go. You can do it. Okay, alright. Let us waste no time. If you guys are ready to go, then I am ready to go. I'd like to go through Coal by Audre Lorde, and I'd like to go through Letter from a Contract Worker by Jacinto, and that is page 198. So depending on how we are sort of midway through the session, if it's letting me share, then I'll share. Otherwise, you'll have to dig out which seasons come to pass on your side and turn to it. But if you have your text or your anthology in front of you, it is 217, I think, or 218 for Coal. Otherwise, you can read along on the screen. 218. Yeah, thanks. Sweet meaties. All right. So I am going to do my best to, I suppose, repeat the tone and the pronunciation here, but I think this is one of the more, I suppose, vivid imagery poems out of the resistance poems. So let's get going. Coal by Audre Lorde. I is the total black being spoken from the earth's inside. There are many kinds of open. How a diamond comes into a knot of flame. How a sound comes into a word, colored by who pays what for speaking. Some words are open, like a diamond on glass windows, singing out within the crash of the passing sun. There are words like stapled wages in a perforated book, buy and sign and tear apart. And whatever wills all chances, the stub remains. And come whatever wills all chances, the stub remains. An ill-pulled tooth with a ragged edge. Some words live in my throat, breeding like adders. Others no sun, seeking like gypsies over my tongue, to explode through my lips, like young sparrows bursting from shell. Some words bedevil me. Love is a word, another kind of open. As a diamond comes into a knot of flame, I am black because I come from the earth's inside. Take my word for jewel in open lights. So, those of you who've had a chance to read over this poem already, any takeaways, anything that stands out to you, anything interesting? that middle stanza is packed full of it. So, Cindy, anything in particular stand out to you with that imagery? Yeah. Um, if you start from the title of a poem, coal, the connotation of coal is quite significant. I would like you guys just to kind of spitball a little bit. What comes to mind when you think of coal? What is the first kind of evoked images or yeah connotations? Hmm. There you go. Okay. Rough and like the word I'm looking for, like unfinished, unpolished, kind of raw. Coal and diamonds both come from the earth. One of the first connotations that comes to mind, or perhaps images, and I know that it's from a deep frame of reference being South African, but the idea of handling coal or charcoal makes my hands dirty, like makes my hands full of soot, and it's very hard to get off. So I remember reading this for the first time and thinking that's that's the first image that comes to mind is this kind of dirt on my hands that's difficult to wash off. Um, I think that it's a significant way to title her poem because there's so many connotations with it. But um, before we kind of go and interpret imagery, I think your coal is come right now. Is it either wet or something? Yeah, it's significant to us. Um, if you move away from the word coal and look at the word black, what are the connotations that come with black? What are the implications of the word black, traditionally speaking? Yeah, well, I think it's easy to jump to racism, but what else? What else when you think of the color black? Not necessarily the race or the skin. Yeah, that's how. Darkness, funeral, uh-huh, mourning. In traditional literary binaries, black and white are colors that represent certain virtues, I guess. Ah, yeah, good and evil. So why I love this poem so much is that Audre Lorde has really shown her mastery of the written word, her understanding of the implications of the written word. The way she's composed this poem is it's got development to it. It's got like a refinement that happens during the course of the poem, and I think that she knows, or she knew, I should have said, what the implications would be. So I'm going to get going from the first line. I'm going to be watching the text box here as much as possible. But if you want to stop me, just use the hands up icon and be prepared to please turn on your mic or type very fast. Who is the subject of this poem, and how do we know that, dude? Mm-hmm. Okay, she identifies herself, giving herself the first line of the poem. I. The way that the second line is written, I is the total black. What is if anything, interesting about that, the phonetic quality of the, not the phonetic quality, I should say, like the syntax, the grammar there. Why is she should be I am, all right? So why is it I is? Does anybody know what this acronym stands for? Okay, so Chantal is heading on what is now known as AAVE, African American Vernacular English, and used to be called Ebonics. And obviously, people recognize that the phrase or term Ebonics is not very politically correct because its root word is ebony, which means black, which is black. Um, so, African American Vernacular English is non standard dialectical English. She's writing her poem in the way that she might have spoken, and making it quite personal because of that. So it's the first thing that kind of smacks me in between the eyes is this I is the total black being spoken from the earth's inside. So there's this positioning that happens in the beginning of the poem that at the beginning of this journey, when we've already identified coal and its source, I suppose, as from within the earth itself, she plants almost a seed of herself and has this recognition that she is very, very closely related to earth, to she's kind of grounded in the earth, not just on the earth. So I is the total black being spoken from the earth's inside. There are many kinds of open. How a diamond comes into a knot of flame. How a sound comes into a word colored by who pays what for speaking. So you'll see she repeats this use of the diamond and flame imagery here. So if you expose a diamond to light, whether it be a flame or a burst of light, what happens to that light? What would you see? Yeah, I suppose depending on the cut of the diamond, but um, the first thing that comes to mind when I think of the diamond exposed to a source of light is that sparkling. It's not necessarily the prismatic effect of the kind of rainbow effect. It's first that very sparkly, eye-catching aspect of it. Um, so she's just kind of, for me, identifying the clarity of the thing and how it's accented or highlighted when exposed to light. How a sound comes into a word, colored by who pays what for speaking. It's possibly one of the most awkward lines of poetry I've ever seen. By who pays what for speaking. And I think I must have got it terribly incorrect the first like 18 times I've read this poem. But there's something significant about these two lines together. How a sound comes into a word, colored by who pays what for speaking. So colored itself is quite a loaded word. It's often used as a way to identify black people in the States. So I think that she's been quite, I think, cheeky about using colored specifically. By who pays what for speaking? Um, the line, if you stare at it for long enough, if you say it often enough, by who pays what for speaking? So words and the value of words are colored or shaped or interpreted by who pays what for speaking. In other words, what have you been through that allows you to speak? What have you experienced that allows you to speak? What have you paid for your speaking? Um, and the meaning of a word or the meaning of a sound is given or gains that meaning by the experience of the speaker. So when we use words like black and colored, they become loaded or they become value laden depending on what your experiences are, depending on what you've paid for speaking. Um, so it's this first stanza that really kind of sets up what she thinks of herself, how she identifies herself as a black woman, but a very natural and grounded association with nature, with the earth itself, and acknowledging that the value of speaking, the value of having something to say is often determined by the experiences of the speaker. So she moves on in the second stanza and talks about the different ways that words can be interpreted, and she has these beautiful multiple images that are portrayed to us about the different types of language and the different types of speaking, the different implications of speaking. So some words are open like a diamond on glass windows, singing out within the crash of passing sun. If you think about this beautiful jewel that is held up to a window to catch the sunlight, that it just creates this prismatic effect, perhaps, or this reflective effect. But generally speaking, when we think of diamonds, we think of something valuable and beautiful. And she's using this simile. Some words are open, like a diamond on glass windows, singing out within the crash of passing sun. That some words are beautiful and clear and just have this overt value to them. Some things can just be beautiful. And then this man, I love it. I love it. Sorry. Then there are words like stapled wages in a perforated book, buy and sign and tear apart. So, what are wagers? Anyone? Yeah. It's quite an old-fashioned term. Obviously, it's not a recent poem, so people would use the word bets these days because a wager is a bet. And to me, unless I misinterpret the imagery, the perforated book is the receipt book or the copybook of the wages. So if you would go to the horse tracks or the dog tracks or somewhere like that, and you would make a bet with the bookie, you would be given one half of the sort of torn off sheet with a record kept in his book of your bets. So there would be perhaps a unique number attached to it, like a raffle ticket. And she says that there are some words like stapled wages in a perforated book, buy and sign and tear apart, and comes whatever wills or chances, the stub remains. So some words are like bets, some words like wages. You don't know what the effect is going to be. You don't know what the outcome is going to be when you say certain things. You're taking a bet, you're taking a chance. But no matter what happens, there will always be a record of that thing that has been said. What has been said cannot be unspoken. There will always be a copy of it somewhere. So she's acknowledging, to me, she's acknowledging that some words are really risky. Some words involve a lot of chance when you decide to speak them. And no matter what you do, you can't take them back. There will always be a record of it. And I think having sold a fair number of raffle tickets in my youth, I think that image kind of pops to mind of that little perforated receipt book. So the image continues. The stub remains an ill-pulled tooth with a ragged edge. Anybody who's ever chipped a tooth or had a tooth extracted and they haven't done a good job. I remember when I had my molars taken out, they had to break the tooth up into little bits and pieces, and they left like a little nick on one of the adjoining teeth, I guess. You had that like sharp, recent kind of jagged edge in your mouth, and you can tongue it and feel it always. It's like something you can't get away from. Anybody who's ever had braces as well will know that feeling, especially when they first go on. This like alien presence in your mouth that is rough, and your tongue seeks it across your teeth, and it's very odd and it's very uncomfortable. So yeah, the stub remains an ill-pulled tooth with a ragged edge. That's not a positive image. That's quite a negative image. It's damage. Sometimes when you say things, you take a chance, and sometimes they leave damage. These words, an ill-pulled tooth with a ragged edge. Then some words live in my throat, breathing like adders. Chantal, was it you that picked that out as interesting? Oh, yes. Sorry, Cindy, it was. Why adders? Why does she say adders? What are adders to begin with? Snakes, yeah. Just a point here. Venomous is the word, not poisonous. So, if you think about this clutch of adders breeding in her throat, they're venomous, they're dangerous. Some words are like these snakes that are breeding in my throat, and it's almost like she's trying to hold them back. But breeding means that they're increasing in number. They're getting perhaps harder to contain, knowing that they can hurt other people if she lets them loose. So this is no longer the bet. This is knowing that some words have to be contained or kept back because of the damage they can cause. Others know sun, seeking like gypsies over my tongue. Why gypsies? What is significant about gypsies? They're wanderers, right? They don't stay in one place for a long time. I think when she says others know sun, it means that they've come out into the light. They're always moving. So yeah. So imagine just having this kind of this backup of words that needs to come, that needs to be delivered, that needs to be spoken, and you just can't keep them back. That's why these words are like gypsies as opposed to the adders that are being held in check because of the danger that they pose. Seeking like gypsies over my tongue to explode through my lips like young sparrows bursting from shell. That's quite a beautiful natural image there that she's chosen. So this birth sorry of words that are clearly associated with something positive, that just can't be held back. It's almost like a celebration of some forms of speaking. Then this very kind of shortened last two lines of the stanza, some words bedevil me. What does bedevil mean? Yeah, haunting, torment. Yeah, so they like some words bring her pain, bring her curse, bring her challenge. One of the things to know about the poet, I think yeah, so there it is at the top here, is her sexuality. That she is not just an activist for race equality speaking, but also for her sexuality. So this last stanza, again, that knowing that about the poet probably informs this opinion of mine. And again, I don't know that it's accurate, but love is a word, another kind of open. And she's spoken about earlier in the first stanza, there are many kinds of open. Here she says, love is a word, another kind of open, implying that there are different ways to interpret love, and that it's not perhaps this predictable, uniform way of loving. So for me, it implies something about the interpretation of the word love, but also perhaps about his sexuality. But then, like I say, I'm being informed by what I know about the poet. So she this version on the screen, and if you have a look in your seasons come to pass, there's a difference here in the word black. So it's a little bit more refined in the text, so I'd rather stick with that. But anyway, as a diamond comes into a knot of flame, she's already set up that image, this kind of beautiful bursting with light, shiny quality of it. So love is a word, another kind of open. As a diamond comes into a knot of flame. I am black because I come from the earth's inside. Now take my word for jewel in your open light. The way it reads in Seasons Come to Pass is I am black, and it's got a capital B. So this earlier version where it says I is the total black, you'll see here it says I am black. But the word black has this capital B to it, and it's like a title now. It's like an honorific. There's a refinement in her speech. There is a refinement in the movement from coal to a diamond, that it's only through kind of great pressure that carbon becomes the diamond itself. And you can see the way her language changes from the beginning of the poem to the end of the poem, that there is a sense of refinement, that she's perhaps been experienced a certain amount of pressure to come out with this solid identity. I am black because I come from the earth's inside. I take my word for jewel in the open light. She's telling you what she wants you to think of her and her message, her speech. She's already set up that image of the diamond held up to light, and she's saying that is what my word is. It's not perhaps the adders in the throat or the jagged tooth in the mouth. It is the diamond in the open light. And what I have to say is beautiful. So I think it's quite a moving poem, but also this really great use of imagery that we can quite easily interpret and envision. So, any thoughts, any comments on it before we move on? Take that as a fat no. I'm going to try and share the screen again. If it starts flip-flopping with my signal, then we'll just have to read it from the text as we go. Give me a tick. Fingers crossed. Okay, ball. Oh, the thought box. I love the thought box. Andrew. Okay. This is the guy here. Letter from a contract worker. So I'm going to watch the text box as much as possible. Please tell me if I time out or anything like that. If you can't hear me. So this, you should be able to find on page 198, at least on this PDF. Let's just double check it in the book. Yeah, 198 in the book. So the contract worker is a concept from Portuguese Angola that is something like indentured servitude or indentured labor, whereby laborers are brought out of the countryside from their farmlands. They sign a contract depending on what the job is. Think mining, for example, where they would contract themselves to work a certain job for a certain amount of time. Often the wages were held back from these guys, and the idea was that they would be paid a lump sum when their contract was over, and that the organization would be compensating them in terms of board and lodging while they were working on contract. as far as I know, it was quite a nefarious system because at some point when they finished their contract, then like taxes would be deducted off that lump sum that they'd earned over the years, after leaving them with very little afterwards. So they would be kind of obliged to re-indenture themselves into another contract just to be able to release that money and send it back home, for example, and potentially earn some more. So it's quite a like I say, quite a nefarious system. It's a way perhaps of keeping a population relatively subjugated, relatively uneducated. Often these guys weren't educated by the colonial Portuguese. They were just really employed for their ability to do manual labor. So there's no focus on their development. Now we know this as the history of the colonial situation in at least Africa, if not all over the world. Nobody goes really and invests in the local population and the indigenous population, and tries to kind of uplift them, um, because that would mean that those sort of colonizers would find themselves very quickly disempowered or without cheap labor, such as in this instance. So, see my signal dropping. You guys can hear me okay still? Okay. All right. So Antonio Jacinto takes on the voice of the contract worker, and this poem evokes imagery that is not merely visual, that involves a certain amount of sensory imagery. Um, so it's also for me quite a sad, um, kind of depressing poem, I guess. But I always feel if a poem makes you feel strongly, one way or another, then the poet's done their job. So I'm going to do my best to read through it, and then we will try and unpack it a bit. So, letter from a contract worker. I wanted to write you a letter, my love, a letter that would tell of this desire to see you, of this fear of losing you, of this more than benevolence that I feel, of this indefinable ill that pursues me, of this yearning to which I live in total surrender. I wanted to write you a letter, my love, a letter of intimate secrets, a letter of memories of you, of you, of your lips red as henna, of your hair black as mud, of your eyes sweet as honey, of your breasts hard as wild orange, of your lynx gait, and of your caresses, such that I could find no better here. I wanted to write you a letter, my love, that would recall the days in our haunts, our nights lost in the long grass, that would recall the shade falling on us from the plum trees, the moon filtering through the endless palm trees, that would recall the madness of our passion and the bitterness of our separation. I wanted to write you a letter, my love. Oopsie. That you would not read without sighing. Come on. That you would hide from Papa Bombo. That you would withhold from Mama Chiesa. That you would reread without the coldness of forgetting, a letter to which in all Colombo no other would stand comparison. I wanted to write you a letter, my love, a letter that would be brought to you by the passing wind, a letter that the cashews and coffee trees, the hyenas and buffaloes, the alligators and grayling could understand, so that if the wind should lose it on the way, the beasts and plants with pity for our sharp suffering, from song to song, lament to lament, gabble to gabble, would bring you pure and hot the burning words, the sorrowful words of the letter I wanted to write to you, my love. I wanted to write you a letter, but oh, my love, I cannot understand why it is, why it is, why it is, my dear, that you cannot read, and I, oh, the hopelessness, cannot write. It still gives me goosebumps, that last stanza. So, any takeaways, sort of first impressions? It is. It's so deeply personal, and yet it's so incredibly impersonal as well, because the poet has imagined a contract worker. He has perhaps he's spoken to guys who would have felt this way, but that last stanza that where he says that you cannot read and I cannot write means that this letter never got written. These sentiments were never expressed. Like, Loretta, there's a what do you call it, a display on at the KZNSA gallery here in Durban at the moment that has a walk-through room that the entire piece is like an interactive art piece um, that is dedicated to Marikana, and it's called 10 Years On. And yeah, it's like it's eerie being in there. It's in his heart. He can't write it. It's so sad. You can't read it. So you'll note, obviously, we're finding another example of this repetition. I wanted to write you a letter, my love, and that sense of I wanted to write you a letter, but is there throughout the poem. That I think before you realize it, you should actually acknowledge the fact that he can't. He never did. I wanted to. I wanted to. So it's a comment by, I think, the poet on the lives and experience of the contract worker. We note that his love is back home somewhere, and he uses this very rustic rural imagery, a lot of nature, a lot of trees, long grass, etc. These gentle but traditional names, Papa Bombo, Mama Chiesa. It invokes to me this idea that it's almost like a village. It's not a town or a city, because of the amount of nature that's referenced in it. That his love lives in. That he is in perhaps an industrial setting, a mining setting, or something like that, and she's back in the village. There's some really interesting pieces of language that I just want to point out, because it's a long poem and don't have that much time. But if there's anything that jumps out at you, please do mention it as we go. So the first thing that really stands out to me is this: I wanted to write you a letter that would tell of this desire to see you, of this fear of losing you, of this more than benevolence that I feel. And the way that's written, so benevolence talks about this kind of pure and ultimate sense of goodness, of love towards somebody else. And it's like he's acknowledging that benevolence is this very high ranking, I suppose, form of love. And he doesn't know a higher way of describing his love. So he says more than benevolence. So it's not like he has the language to describe how he feels. So he just like, it's like, I love you plus infinity. This more than benevolence. This second stanza is always quite kind of fun for me, as much fun as can be taken from a sad kind of topic like this. So obviously we have this repetition. I wanted to write you a letter, my love, a letter of intimate secrets, a letter of memories of you. So these intimate secrets imply that they have, or this contract worker potentially has a very close relationship with her. And it doesn't necessarily need to be sexual, those intimate secrets, just that it's something that only they share. So he reverts to using some significant natural imagery that I think he realizes a contextual audience would understand. So your lips red as henna. It's a very dark, almost brown kind of red that he's referring to. This your lips red as henna, your hair black as mud, and I think of like really rich soil, that really kind of black, rich farm soil. So these are both images that aren't hard to grasp. So this very deep red, this very thick black hair that she has, of your eyes sweet as honey. So sweet as honey is a simile that might provoke a visual image, but in poetry we get sensory imagery. So it can be visual, it can be auditory, it can be gustatory, it can be tactile. Um, it's it depends on how the poet uses it. So your eyes sweet as honey implies we know that honey tastes sweet, but I doubt very much that he's licked her eyes. So it implies that there's also this kind of color to her eyes, this kind of deep, dark honey color. But also, when he says sweet as honey, that means it's supposed to invoke this gustatory sense that we can almost taste it. Okay. Bye, Renee. Then the next line is one that always gets a chuckle out of anybody that has read. Of your breasts hard as wild orange. So if you've ever bought fruit before and you want to test how ripe it is, you're going to give it a squeeze. So just think of going to a store and picking up an orange or picking up like a grapefruit or something like that and giving it a bit of a squeeze. Now, if you could see me, you'll see that I'm making squeezing gestures with my hands because what else are you going to do? And that's a tactile image that the poet has created. So you know what hard or ripe fruit feels like. And he's referencing her breast hard as wild orange so that you can almost feel how firm these things are just by using that reference. And I think although, slightly awkward, it's quite a well played line that will make the reader or the audience go, okay, I know exactly what that feels like. Then your lynx gait, this kind of swaying feline way that his love walks, this languid, um, controlled but quite sexual, I think, way that she walks. So he's imagining her in this light. And then the last two lines of this stanza, please take a look here. He said that I want to write you a letter of intimate secrets about you, a letter about your lips, your hair, your eyes, your breasts, your lynx gait, and of your caresses, such that I can find no better here. What do you think is implied by that line, such that I can find no better here? So remember, he's in position in a sort of urban setting, I suppose, and she's back at the village. He talks about all these wonderful qualities of her caresses, such that I can find no better here. That, yeah, I think so, Cindy. I think that is the implication. I know that one of the primary problems caused by migrant labor in our own kind of history, whether it be colonial or apartheid, even now, is that it takes or causes men to travel away from their families and the villages and whatnot and go and live in cities. So we end up with townships like Soweto, like Kwamashu, etc., that start to build up around the cities because of the migrant labor aspects of it. And a lot of the people are sending money home to their wife or their family in the village, and often what happens is they philander, they wander, they get lonely, they haven't seen their wife for many years or many months or weeks or whatever it might be, and they end up going elsewhere. So for me, it feels like a reference to that, and it's often post-colonial critique of these setups that it causes a disruption in the family system because the contract worker, for example, is sending money home to, let's say, wife and kids, and then he ends up with a girlfriend in the city, and she ends up pregnant, and then he has to support that child as well, and that meager income that he's getting is diluted now between two potential families rather than one potential family. So the amount of support he can offer is very limited. So not to say that we ever had a context of a nuclear family in this country or in the African setting, but it's a problem. And I think that the poet is recognizing that that is a real. Some women sell their bodies to minorities. Yeah. So he's not to say this is completely acceptable or whatever. I've gotten some quite scathing looks from students who are speaking about it, but I think it is a reality when people are far away for a long period of time and unable to return, that this does happen. Not always, but many times. So the next stanza, I wanted to write you a letter that recall the days in our haunts, our nights lost in the long grass. We would recall the shade falling from the plum trees, the moon filtering through the endless palm trees. We would recall the madness of our passion and the bitterness of our separation. So he paints quite a significant natural image, amount of natural imagery here that sets up the environment that they come from. Our nights in the long grass that recall the shade falling on us from the plum trees, not just the trees, the plum trees, the moon filtering through the endless palm trees. If you spend a little bit of time with that imagery, you can see it in your mind's eye where they were, where they would spend their time together. I wanted to write you a letter, my love, that you could not read without sighing, that you would hide from Papa Bombo, like you wouldn't want your father to see this kind of letter. You wouldn't let your mother read it either. That you would reread without the coldness of forgetting. A letter to which all in Colombo, now he mentions a specific location here. So you can go and research and find out exactly where this contract worker supposedly came from. No other would stand a comparison. He wanted to write her this letter that was so beautiful, that was so intimate, that was so personal, that no other letter ever read by anybody in their village would ever compare. I'll make a comment here that I think because this was originally published in Portuguese, that there has been a translation error here. What is wrong with alligators in the African context? Yeah, so it should be crocodiles, and I think that there's been a translation error there. So it becomes quite metaphysical in the stanza, and he employs croconosters. He employs the natural world to carry this sentiment, even if the letter got lost, that the animals themselves and the plants themselves would transmit the intention behind the letter. A letter that would be brought to you by the passing wind, a letter that the cashews and coffee trees, the hyenas and buffaloes, the alligators and grayling could understand. Uh, okay. A war camp, or so I mean it's capitalized as, just sorry guys, just a sec. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. But the Brazilian hinterland settlement found about people of African origin and others sometimes called Garibaldians than having kilometers. Okay, all right, that's better. Self-sustaining remote communities founded by runaway. Ha! That brings a whole level of context to the poem that hadn't been there before I started reading this. That's awesome. Excuse me. Okay. Where was I? The natural imagery here. So, like I say, it becomes a little bit metaphysical when he takes the natural world and gives it kind of almost spiritual qualities or esoteric qualities, being able to transmit this love to his love. That use of repetition. I wanted to write you a letter, my love. I wanted to write you a letter, my love. But oh, my love. I mean, he calls her my love throughout the poem, even if he has strayed, even if he has philandered. This is the person that he loves. This is the one he wants to be with, this contract worker. But oh, my love, I cannot understand why it is, my dear, that you cannot read. I, oh, the hopelessness, cannot write. So when I first saw those lines, obviously there's this kind of this beautiful intent that's set up in the poem the whole way through of what he would have done and how he would have told her how he felt if he was able to read and write. It makes me think how many people were not given the opportunity to learn basic literacy, how many people under these sort of systems essentially died nameless and voiceless because they were unable to write their own letters, to write their own stories, and were simply used for their labor and their ability to swing a pick. Makes me think of so many unheard voices, so many lost voices. I think it's such a powerful poem, this, and you can see that there's not a great deal of like rhyme and rhythm in it, and that the poet chooses to forgo that in order to create the message that he wants to create without making it into something lyrical, something sing-songy, and something you might take lightly. We need cold on here. It's come to our power back on the Sorry, I've had my load shedding for the day, thankfully. I'll be back tomorrow. All right, guys, that is all I wanted to do for tonight. Next week, I am in the Berg and unable to do a contact session, but we'll pick up from the week after. In the meantime, the Weaver Bird and I'm in Danger, Sir, and then we should be good and done. So we'll meet up. What day will it be? Okay, no problem. Yeah, I just want to check what date we'll be back online. I'll send out an announcement for this 13th. Okay, and that's still several weeks away from your assignment, so you'll be golden. Bye, guys. Have a good evening, and I hope you get your power back ASAP. Ciao. Bye, guys. Bye, Larissa. Bye, Hunter.